I guess we'll just start kind of big picture. Let's start by, defining birthright citizenship. Give me an overview. What is it? What does it guarantee?
Sure. Birthright citizenship comes from the 14th Amendment to the Constitution that was put into the Constitution after the Civil War. And it has been interpreted by the Supreme Court to say that people who are born within the geographic boundaries of the United States are citizens of the United States. And so they can be citizens even though their parents are not.
And I want to talk about the executive order yesterday, but I guess what you said made me, just wonder, can something like that, a precedent established by the U.S. Supreme Court, be changed by something as simple, if you will, as an executive order, or does the Supreme Court have to change that? How does that work?
Well, there are a number of steps to that. Um, the the president's executive order adopts a interpretation of words in the 14th Amendment, particularly subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And so he would argue that the Supreme Court case that interpreted the 14th Amendment doesn't cover the people who he's talking about, which are the people people who don't have documents in the United States. So what we're talking about here is a question of interpretation of words in the Constitution and an argument by the president that the Supreme Court cases haven't particularly addressed the situation that he says he's addressing. Now, the argument on the other side is yes, the Supreme Court cases have addressed that, and people have assumed for almost 100 years that, in fact, there is what we call birthright citizenship.
So the big question comes down to whether the parents who have the children, the mother specifically who has the child on U.S. soil, as it were, is undocumented or is here legally. Is that the big discrepancy?
Yeah, the executive order covers people whose mothers are not legally in the United States and whose fathers are not U.S. citizens or lawful permanent residents, and people whose mothers were in the country legally but on a temporary basis and whose fathers were not citizens or legal permanent residents. Uh, that's what it covers.
As you can imagine, and I'm sure as you have seen, there's a lot of misinformation, fear, concerns swirling around this, including, is this retroactive? That's why someone asked, could Kamala Harris be deported? I mean, people are having these questions online. I guess my first question about that is, what do you think is most important for people to know about this, perhaps to dispel fears, rumors, and so forth?
One thing to know is that the president is signing lots of executive orders. And like with any actions that either presidents or other legislative bodies take, sometimes they can take them for reasons other than thinking that it's entirely lawful and it will be upheld by a court. And so there's some public relations value to doing something, even if it might not be legal. There are very strong questions about whether this is legal. Number one, because the Constitution is what arguably says it isn't, but also whether the president can even do it by an executive order, or whether Congress needs to act, or whether, when we're talking about the 14th Amendment, we actually need an amendment to the Constitution. The other thing I should point out is the court process. We have lawsuits already challenging this executive order. They will go before a court, and the very first thing they'll ask for is an emergency order that puts the president's executive order on hold. And given how questionable this is, I have to expect that a federal court will say, I'm issuing an order right now. We need to have a full trial here to figure out whether this is a constitutional thing. And so it won't take effect for many, many months, I would predict. Finally, at this point, it doesn't appear to be retroactive. It would apply into the future whenever it takes effect.
Yeah, so fair to say there are a lot of legitimate questions, legitimate legal questions out there that will be worked out through the proper court system, a matter of months, not days or weeks.
Exactly right. I would say in days, we could have a hearing on an emergency order to what we call stay the president's executive order. And so we will see that going on in court. And we would expect before its effective date, which is, I think, in about 30 days. So a court could take a week or so to decide what to do. But I expect we'll see a court order putting this on hold and making sure that there's time for both sides to make their arguments about what the meaning of this is. And this very strong argument will be that we already have an interpretation of the Constitution that's been going for a long, long time. If anybody's going to change that, it would have to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. To make that change, that would take a couple of years. And probably, as I said, it's a constitutional amendment. And that process would take a very long time and would have to have 2/3 of the states saying that they think it's an appropriate change to the Constitution, especially something like this that's been accepted definition of citizenship in the United States for so long.
So yeah, a very difficult process by design to change the Constitution, something as serious and profound as that document to our nation's laws.
Exactly right. In contrast to the California Constitution, which we can change quite easily, but there are different decisions made, and the federal Constitution is very, very hard to change.
One more just quick question, just to clarify this. So the executive order is meant to go into effect 30 days from now. So I guess to allay some folks' fears about what's happening right now, well, A, it's not in effect quite yet, and B, you anticipate there will be movements in the courts to stay this before it is set to go into effect.
Yes, I expect both of those. Well, yes, I'm going to reiterate that it doesn't go into effect immediately. I believe it's 30 days. And during those 30 days, at least one federal court will be listening to arguments and deciding whether to issue an emergency order. That means that the order won't go in effect until there's been a final judgment by a court about whether it's legal. And not only that, it would work its way up from the district court to a court of appeals to the United States Supreme Court. When we're talking about something this important, I have to expect that it would not go into effect until the United States Supreme Court said something about it.
Sure. Is there anything else? I know we'll probably talk again as this moves forward in coming months, but is there anything else right now that you think is important for folks to keep in mind that we haven't yet addressed?
No, not really. No. I mean, what we see with this is we see the president taking action. Arguably, Congress should take action. Certainly, the courts are going to take action. With big changes like this, we're going to see all the branches of government involved and the citizens.
Yeah, I know. We were at the ACLU announcement at the Capitol today about how they are filing a lawsuit, to your point, about the legal challenges. I guess the last question in my head, and maybe this is a question for later down the line, but we're obviously very aware that there are some judicial Trump appointees who are perhaps more friendly to his agenda, who might interpret the law more favorably toward his desires. Given that this would be a change to the Constitution or a change to very long established precedent, do you think that even a Trump appointee might have pause in enacting something like this?
Uh, you're talking about how different judges will interpret precedent and apply it, and it's going to depend upon the judges. Judgment is involved in judging. That's just how it goes. But I will emphasize once again that there's a single district court judge that would make a decision, but then it goes up to a circuit court where you at least get 3 judges. And then it goes up to the Supreme Court where you've got the 9. So there are different judges involved in the process. And the point of that is supposed to be that different points of view come into play.